Why do people prefer cities?
Cities still have this magnetic pull.
Cities are noisy, expensive, crowded.
Traffic, high rent, small apartments.
Crowded but lonely, surrounded by thousands of people.
Still feel invisible.
Fast-paced lifestyle. Others prefer peace and quiet.
Innovation means new ideas, talent, ambition, competition. Calculating if you can afford extra guacamole. Classic city moment.
Welcome back to StoryOrbitEN. Today we are diving into a big question that almost everyone has thought about at some point. Why do people prefer to live in cities? I mean, cities are noisy, expensive, crowded, and sometimes stressful. And yet millions of people choose city life every single day. So what is going on?
That is such a good question. And I love that you started with the negatives because that is what people usually complain about first. Traffic, high rent, small apartments. But somehow, cities still have this magnetic pull.
By the way, when we say magnetic pull, we mean something that attracts you strongly, like a magnet attracts metal. Cities seem to attract people in the same way.
I have a friend who complains about the city every single Monday. She says, "I am done. I am moving to the countryside. I want chickens." And then on Friday, she is posting photos from a rooftop bar saying, "Best city ever."
Haha, even if someone grows up in a quiet town, they often dream of moving to a big city. Maybe it is about opportunities, jobs, education, networking. When we say networking, we mean meeting people who can help you professionally. Cities are full of those chances.
Totally. If you want to work in tech, finance, fashion, media, or almost any industry, cities are often the hub. And hub is another useful word. A hub is a central place where a lot of activity happens. So a city can be a business hub, a cultural hub, even a transportation hub. It is like the center of everything.
That is true. And I think there is also this feeling of being where things happen. Concerts, exhibitions, new restaurants, events. In a city, you rarely get bored. At least that is what people think. Do you agree with that? Or do you think cities can still feel boring?
Oh, they can definitely feel boring. If you do not make an effort, you can live in the most exciting city in the world and still feel isolated. And isolated means feeling alone or disconnected from others. That is interesting because cities are crowded, but you can still feel lonely. It sounds contradictory, right?
It does sound contradictory. Crowded, but lonely. That is such a common experience. You can be surrounded by thousands of people on the subway and still feel invisible. By the way, surrounded by means you have people or things all around you. It is a nice phrase for describing physical or emotional situations.
And the subway is a perfect example of city life. Fast, efficient, but also intense. People rushing, checking their phones, barely making eye contact. That word, rushing, is important too. It means moving quickly because you are in a hurry. City life often feels like one big rush.
That is so true. People are always in a hurry, and that creates this fast-paced lifestyle. When we say fast-paced, we mean something that moves quickly and does not slow down. A fast-paced lifestyle can be exciting, but it can also be exhausting.
I agree completely, and I think that is part of the appeal. Some people thrive in that environment. To thrive means to grow, succeed, or do very well in a particular situation. Some personalities just thrive in busy, dynamic places.
And others prefer peace and quiet. I think it depends a lot on personality. Are you someone who gets energy from being around people, or do you get energy from being alone? That connects to the idea of being extroverted or introverted. An extrovert feels energized by social interaction, while an introvert needs alone time to recharge.
Recharge is a great word. We usually use it for phones or batteries, but we also use it for ourselves. If you say, "I need to recharge," you mean you need rest or quiet time. In cities, sometimes it is hard to recharge because there is always noise.
Noise pollution is a big issue. Sirens, traffic, construction. But at the same time, some people find comfort in that noise. It makes them feel alive. Silence can feel strange to someone who grew up in a busy city. They might say, "It is too quiet here." That sounds funny, but it happens.
Yes. And that brings up another interesting word, comfort zone. A comfort zone is a situation where you feel safe and familiar. For many people, the city is their comfort zone, even with all the chaos. Chaos means complete disorder or confusion. Cities can be chaotic, but it is a familiar chaos.
Familiar chaos. is such a good phrase. It is like you know what to expect, even if it is crazy. And then there is diversity. Cities are usually very diverse. You meet people from different countries, cultures, religions, backgrounds. That exposure can really broaden your horizons.
I love that expression. Broaden your horizons. It means to expand your knowledge and experience. When you live in a city, you might try food from 5 different countries in 1 week. You might hear multiple languages on the street. It makes the world feel bigger and smaller at the same time.
Bigger and smaller at the same time? That sounds confusing.
Let me explain. Bigger because you realize how many different lifestyles and perspectives exist. Smaller because you meet people from around the world in one place, so the world feels more connected.
That makes sense. And that connection can be inspiring. You might hear someone talk about their startup, their art project, their activism. That word activism refers to efforts to bring about social or political change. Cities often become centers for activism and innovation.
Innovation is another key reason people move to cities. Innovation means new ideas, new methods, new technology. Many breakthroughs happen in cities because people collaborate, and collaboration often leads to creativity.
So cities are like idea factories?
In a way, yes. They bring together talent, ambition, competition. And competition can push people to improve. Of course, competition can also create pressure. But for some people, that pressure is motivating.
That word motivating is important. If something is motivating, it makes you want to act or improve. But not everyone reacts to pressure the same way. Some people feel overwhelmed. To feel overwhelmed means to feel like something is too much to handle.
And cities can definitely be overwhelming. High rent, long working hours, crowded spaces. The cost of living is another major factor. Cost of living refers to how much money you need to pay for basic things like rent, food, transport.
Let us talk about rent for a moment. In many big cities, rent is sky high. When we say sky high, we mean extremely high. I once saw an apartment described as cozy and full of charm. It was basically a bed next to a sink. And that can be stressful, especially for young professionals just starting out.
Starting out is a great phrase. It means beginning your career or a new stage in life. Many people move to cities when they are starting out because that is where the opportunities are. They are willing to live in small apartments or share with roommates.
Sharing with roommates is such a city experience. Sometimes it leads to lifelong friendships. Other times it leads to arguments about cleaning and noise. But it is part of the adventure.
Adventure is a key word. City life often feels like an adventure. You never know who you will meet or what will happen. That unpredictability can be exciting. Unpredictability means you cannot easily guess what will happen next.
Do you think people romanticize city life?
Oh, absolutely. To romanticize something means to see it as better or more glamorous than it really is. Movies and TV shows often show beautiful apartments, trendy cafes, and perfect friendships. They do not always show the long commutes or the tiny kitchens.
In movies, the main character lives in a huge apartment in the city center and somehow works part-time at a bookstore.
Meanwhile, in real life, you are calculating if you can afford extra guacamole.
Commute is another useful word. Your commute is the journey you take from home to work or school. In cities, the commute can be long, sometimes over an hour each way. That can really affect your quality of life.
Quality of life is a phrase learners should know. It refers to your overall well-being, including comfort, happiness, and health. Some people feel their quality of life is better in a small town because they have more space and less stress.
But others feel their quality of life is better in a city because they have more options, more restaurants, more events, more career paths. It is interesting how the same environment can mean different things to different people.
That is such a good point. And I want to ask our listeners something. If you could choose right now, would you prefer to live in a busy city or a quiet town, and why? Try to answer using at least one of the expressions we mentioned, like comfort zone or broaden your horizons.
Yes, that is a great challenge. And maybe think about your personality. Do you thrive in a fast-paced environment, or do you need to recharge in silence? There is no right or wrong answer.
Another reason people prefer cities is access to services. Hospitals, universities, public transport, entertainment, everything is usually within reach. Within reach means easy to access or obtain.
That convenience is powerful. You can walk to the grocery store, take a bus to work, meet a friend at a cafe, all in one neighborhood. In smaller places, you might need a car for everything.
And that connects to sustainability. Some people argue that city living can be more environmentally friendly because of public transport and smaller living spaces. Of course, cities also produce a lot of pollution.
So, it is complex. There are trade-offs. A trade-off is when you give up one thing to gain another. You might give up space and quiet in exchange for opportunity and excitement.
I like that explanation. And I think that is the heart of the question. Why do people prefer to live in cities? Because for them, the benefits outweigh the disadvantages. Outweigh means to be more important or more significant than something else.
That is such a useful verb. The advantages outweigh the drawbacks. Drawbacks are disadvantages or negative aspects. So when the excitement, diversity, and opportunity outweigh the stress and cost, people choose the city.
And sometimes it is not even a choice. Sometimes people move to cities out of necessity. That word means because they have to, not because they want to. Maybe there are no jobs in their hometown.
That is true. Migration to cities is often driven by economic necessity. But once people arrive, they might discover new passions and communities. Communities in cities can be very strong, even if the city is huge.
That is another contradiction. Big population, small communities. You might live in a massive city but feel deeply connected to your neighborhood. Neighborhood is a word learners should practice. It refers to a specific area within a city or town.
And neighborhoods often have their own identity. One might be artistic, another financial, another residential and quiet. That variety makes city life rich and layered.
Layered is a nice adjective. It means having multiple levels or aspects. City life is layered because there are so many experiences happening at once.
You know, this whole conversation reminds me of my first week living in a big city. I arrived with 2 suitcases and a very dramatic sense of independence. I told everyone I am ready for city life. On day 2, I got lost on the subway and ended up in a completely different neighborhood. I stood there pretending I knew exactly where I was going, but inside I was thinking, what have I done?
That is such a classic city moment. You want to look confident even when you have no idea what is happening.
And the funny thing is, 1 year later, I was the person giving directions to tourists like I had lived there my whole life. That is how cities work. At first, they intimidate you. But if you stay long enough, you adapt.
That is so true. My version of that moment happened in a grocery store, not the subway. On my first week in the city, I went in to buy something simple like milk and bread. 40 minutes later, I was still there because there were 15 types of milk. Almond, oat, soy, lactose-free, organic, something called barista edition. I just stood there staring at the shelf like it was a final exam.
That is hilarious. So what did you do?
I panicked and bought the most expensive one because I assumed it must be the best. That was my first city lesson. More choice does not always mean less confusion. But now I walk into that same store and grab what I need in 2 minutes. That is adaptation in action.
Great. Before we finish, let us quickly recap some of the key words and expressions we used. We talked about magnetic pull, hub, networking, fast-paced, thrive, comfort zone, broaden your horizons, cost of living, starting out, romanticize, commute, quality of life, trade-off, and outweigh.
And do not forget overwhelmed, within reach, necessity, and layered. Try to create your own sentences with at least 3 of these expressions. For example, you could write, I prefer city life because the opportunities outweigh the high cost of living.
Or maybe, living in a small town is my comfort zone, but I want to move to a city to broaden my horizons. See how natural that sounds?
We would love to read your sentences. Write them in the comments and tell us where you live right now. Are you in a big city, a small town, or somewhere in between?
Thank you for spending your time with us on StoryOrbitEN. We hope this conversation helped you learn new vocabulary while thinking about your own lifestyle preferences.
Keep practicing, keep listening, and remember that learning a language is a journey. See you in the next episode of StoryOrbitEN.